From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
This is the epicenter, really, of the humanitarian tragedy of the Congo. Perhaps the worst in the world for this last decade. These women and children have been abused, have been raped, have lost everything.
Jan Egeland, the former United Nations Emergency Relief Coordinator, the man once described as the world's conscience, joins us today to discuss his new book, A Billion Lives, an eyewitness report from the front lines of humanity. Then a federal appeals court has rejected calls for a new trial for one of the world's most famous death row prisoners, Mumia Abu-Jamal. Protests are scheduled today in New York and San Francisco. We'll speak to his attorney. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Tens of thousands of Iraqis took to the streets of Baghdad Thursday to protest the ongoing government crackdown on Shia fighters loyal to Mahdi al-Sadr. More than 130 people have been killed since Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki launched the crackdown on Sadr's Mahdi army on Tuesday. Earlier today, Maliki said he would extend a deadline for Mahdi fighters to lay down their arms until April 8th. As the fighting escalated, President Bush continued to sound off on the White House theme that the violence in Iraq marks a sign of U.S. success.
This offensive builds on the security gains of the surge and demonstrates to the Iraqi people that their government is committed to protecting them. There's a strong commitment by the central government of Iraq to say that no one is above the law. This operation is going to take some time to complete. And the enemy, will try to fill the TV screens with violence. But the ultimate result will be this. Terrorists and extremists in Iraq will know they have no place in a free and democratic society.
Despite President Bush's claims, reports on the ground say the U.S. military is still waging much of the fighting. According to the Washington Post, an Iraqi battalion mostly stayed on the outskirts of Sadr City as U.S. troops led the attacks. U.S. armored vehicles, supported by helicopters and drones, were seen battling Mahdi forces. U.S. gunfire was heard throughout Thursday's clashes. Mahdi army commanders corroborated the account, saying they've been mostly fighting U.S. forces in Sadr City. One senior Mahdi army member said, quote, "If there were no Americans, there would be no fighting." Meanwhile, in Basra, a Mahdi army member said several Iraqi troops had laid down their arms rather than fight.
We are
members of the Mahdi army. We thank the soldiers who handed out their weapons and equipment. We thank them as they did not fight their brothers in the Mahdi army. We want to tell Maliki that Basra is safe. So we ask him not to ignite the situation and the mounting number of casualties.
Anonymous U.S. officials say Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki decided to launch the anti-Sadr offensive without even consulting Washington. Administration officials are said to be struggling to understand the situation on the ground. The violence also continued to hit the U.S.-controlled Green Zone. On Thursday, an American contractor was killed by one of 12 mortar rounds fired inside the zone's heavily fortified walls. Meanwhile, the death toll from Wednesday's U.S. bombing in the town of Hilla remains unknown. Witnesses have reported anywhere between 10 and 80 casualties. A local resident said Hilla had not been used for insurgent activity.
What is the reason behind attacking us? We did not fight them or attack a police center or military base. We did not threaten anyone or participate in demonstrations. No military actions in our area.
In other Iraq news, a newly disclosed memo is warning of deplorable conditions at a prison in Fallujah. According to Consortium News, Western Iraq U.S. Commander Major General John Kelly writes, "The jail is so overcrowded and dirty, it does not meet minimal standards of hygiene for human beings." U.S. Marines oversee operations of the prison. More than 900 prisoners are said to be housed at the jail, even though it's supposed to hold just over 100. Meanwhile, the British government has admitted its forces tortured 9 Iraqi prisoners in 2003. The admission could lead to compensation payments to the 8 surviving prisoners and the family of the 9th, who died from beatings by British jailers. The slain victim, Iraqi hotel worker Baha Musa, suffered 93 injuries to his body. Musa was 26 years old, the father of 2 children. His wife died just 2 months earlier of a brain tumor. Meanwhile, back in the United States, more than 36 Democratic congressional candidates have pledged to make an immediate Iraq withdrawal a centerpiece of their upcoming campaigns. The proposal, dubbed a responsible plan to end the war in Iraq, would still keep troops in Iraq to guard the U.S. Embassy, but it differs from Democratic leaders and both presidential candidates in refusing to keep tens of thousands of troops in Iraq to train Iraqis or engage in so-called anti-terrorism operations. A federal appeals court has refused to overturn the conviction of imprisoned journalist and former Black Panther Mumia Abu-Jamal and rejected his call for a new trial. However, Thursday's long-awaited ruling says Abu-Jamal, on death row for 26 years, deserves a new sentencing hearing because of flawed jury instructions. The latest decision from the 3rd U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals emphasizes a lower court in Pennsylvania can now either give him life without parole or convene a new sentencing jury that will decide between the death penalty and life without parole. Abu-Jamal was convicted for killing a white police officer following a controversial trial in 1982 before a predominantly white jury. In Alabama, former Governor Don Siegelman has been ordered released from jail while he appeals a conviction on corruption charges. Siegelman is currently serving a 7-year, 4-month prison sentence on charges of bribery, conspiracy, and mail fraud. Critics say he's the target of a political witch hunt. More than 50 former state attorneys general have called for a congressional investigation into Siegelman's case. The release was ordered just hours after the House Judiciary Committee said it would call Siegelman to testify over whether his prosecution was politically motivated. Meanwhile, in Puerto Rico, Governor Aníbal Acevedo Vila has been charged with 19 counts in a campaign finance probe. Charges, Acevedo says, could be politically motivated. The indictment also names 12 others in his popular Democratic Party. Acevedo has previously accused prosecutors of targeting him for his criticism of the 2005 FBI killing of Puerto Rican militant independence leader Filiberto Ojeda Rios. Israel is being accused of carrying out new extrajudicial killings of Palestinians in the occupied territories. On Thursday, the Israeli human rights group B'Tselem said Israeli troops deliberately murdered 4 Palestinian militants in Bethlehem earlier this month. Sadiq Mikhaeli of B'Tselem says Israeli troops made no effort to arrest the victims.
According to the Israeli High Court, it is not permissible to intentionally kill a Palestinian suspect if there is a possibility of using less extreme measures, such as arresting and trying him. Based on our research, it appears that the forces on this operation acted as if it was an assassination operation. They did not make any attempt to arrest the 4 suspects, but immediately opened fire at them, and following that, confirmed the kill by firing at them again after the operation was over.
The March 12th attack broke a temporary 5-day tacit truce between Israel and Palestinian militants. In Pakistan, a visiting U.S. delegation faced allegations Thursday of trying to pressure the new Pakistani government into supporting the so-called war on terror. Deputy Secretary of State John Negroponte and Assistant Secretary of State Richard Boucher arrived in Pakistan this week just before the swearing-in of the new Prime Minister, Yusuf Raza Gilani. The trip has been seen as a sign of U.S. meddling, coming before Pakistan's new cabinet has been named. Speaking in Karachi, Negroponte tried to dismiss the speculation.
This suggestion that somehow that we expect Pakistan to carry out activities on our behalf and at our behest that are not in Pakistan's interest is simply wrong. So I think that anything that is done in this area has got to be in our mutual interest and judged to be of mutual benefit. And, of course, we will respect whatever decision is taken by the Pakistani authorities in that regard.
Negroponte spoke hours after the Washington Post revealed the U.S. has increased military attacks against what it calls al-Qaeda targets in Pakistan. Amidst concerns, Pakistan's new government will try to limit future U.S. operations. U.S. military aircraft have struck 3 targets over the past 2 months, killing around 45 foreign fighters near the Afghan border. Civilian casualties are unknown. In Tibet, the Chinese government allowed in a group of foreign journalists Thursday, the first since unrest broke out earlier this month. In Lhasa, a group of monks stormed a Chinese government news briefing and accused China of lying about the situation on the ground.
They just don't believe us. They think we will come out and cause havoc, smash, destroy, rob, burn. We didn't do anything like that. They are falsely accusing us.
All monasteries in Lhasa remain closed amidst a large deployment of Chinese forces.